Hi everyone! Thank you so much for joining me back on John's Chaotic Healing. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Today is Sunday, which means we are on my favorite topic, which is Autistic InfoDump, where I talk to you about my latest stimming activities mixed with, we're gonna dive into a bit of research, educational content, whatever that may be, something I found fascinating in my world of learning and love for autism. So here we go. Let's see. Stimming. Oh gosh, I can't believe it. I don't think I've done much stimming this week, which is actually quite bad. That's not a good sign. I would say, have I done any stimming? A lot of repetitive words, I would say, is my stimming. I can't say that I've done any rocking back and forth. I haven't flapped my hands as much. It's coming out as, oh, maybe that's why today happened. Realizing that at the time that I'm filming this, I had what's called an autistic meltdown. Now I'm realizing that's because I didn't stim. Do your stimming, folks! All right, so with that, I'm gonna be doing stimming real quick as we continue this video, as we dive into this week's topic, which is actually a study by the University of Queensland in Australia, partnered with Harvard University in America. So this is an international study between two universities. So both Ivy Leagues in their own retrospective countries. And I am quite excited about this. What is that noise? Oh, that was really weird. That was a weird noise. Did you hear that? I heard that. Okay, moving on. And this study is a global study, which means it's focusing on the entire population of the entire world. The entire world. Wow. I don't know why I did that. That was very dramatic. Anyways, it's focusing on the entire world population, and it focuses on 27 countries, and this sample was 150,000 adults between the 29 countries. And this was a study that took place from 2001 through all the way through 2022. It's one of the largest studies to date, and it was supported by the World Health Organization and their World Mental Health Survey Initiative. So, one of the lead authors, Professor McGrath, was actually quite amazing. And what this study found was that half of the entire population on this entire earth will experience a mental health condition at least once in our lifetime. Which means that if you're in a room full of 10 people, at least 5 of you will experience a mental health condition in your lifetime. And why is that important? Well, let me tell you. Because that means that is why we are trying to normalize mental health. That is why this channel exists. Is to normalize and educate talking about mental health, because there is it's going to apply to you, it's going to apply to your friends, and if you have a friend circle of 6 of you, at least half of you may experience a mental health condition at least once in your lifetime. And if you're wondering, they also found that the risk of certain mental health conditions differed by sex, which sex is different from gender, okay? So they're focusing on, I guess, classifying men versus women. They're not really looking into transgender identities, which is a limitation of this study. But they found that the 3 most common mental health conditions among cisgender women were depression, a specific phobia. And specific phobias are something that limits your daily life related to one specific thing. So specifically say a fear of books or a fear of spiders, a fear of needles, and it disables your everyday life to an extreme point. And also for women, the third top, can you guess it? Women might not be so surprised, men might be surprised, is post-traumatic stress disorder, which quite literally means that through all of this world, we are traumatizing women. And I don't mean that in a happy space. I mean that like we need to get our stuff together, because for that to be a most common thing is really saying something. But if you're wondering the 3 most common mental health conditions among men, or rather cisgender men, here we go. Alcohol abuse, which not surprising because gender roles, men are socialized to suppress their feelings. So there's that. Depression, also quite interesting because one of the most common mental health conditions across the board was major depression, and specific phobias as well. So we can see that specific phobias and anxiety across the board is one of the most common. What is also interesting is that the researchers found that these mental health conditions emerge throughout most of life, somewhere between childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood, which means anywhere between, say, 3 years old and I guess young adulthood generally ends around 25. Somewhere between 25 years old will be when these onsets occur. However, there was differences in gender when the peak of the first onset went, which means the most common age, which meant that a person would experience their first mental health condition, and at the peak of it was 15 years old, which is right in the middle of middle adolescence. And then it had a median age, which means middle middle of 19 years old for men. So at the very tail end of late adolescence for men, and 20 years old for women. So right at the beginning of young adulthood for women. And so it's quite interesting that the onset is towards the end of late adolescence and beginning of young adulthood. And now it's also that their researchers advocate for a future neuroscience and for a focus on young people and for also understanding these critical parts of our lives. And so I think that's really interesting. And what this means for us is that if you are a teen, it is okay. It's normal for you to be stressed. These are big changes happening in your life, big parts of your life that you're having to figure out. At the same time, it is the most important time of your life that if you are feeling like you are struggling and it's more than adolescent stages, that it is okay to seek help and see a mental health professional if you can. There are resources available. And at worst case, seek out a crisis hotline like 988 crisis text lines. Text home to 741-741 24/7 to reach a trained crisis counselor like myself. As you can see, I'm very excited about this survey because it is such a groundbreaking study. It really shows that it's so important for us to be talking about mental health because it affects everyone. And by everyone, I mean if 1 out of 2 of us are going to experience a mental health condition, that quite literally means that there's at least 1 out of 2 of us who's going to be taking care of someone or supporting someone with a mental health condition. And so think about that. And so I'll put the study in the description as I usually do if you want further reading. And I'm going to leave that here because I just think that is such a big and important study. And for those that don't know, 150,000 people, pretty big number. That's like a population of a state, though I can't remember a state off the top of my head. But keep that in mind. I'll leave you with that. I'll leave you thinking about that because mental illness is so much more common and we need to be talking about it more. Thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for existing too. And please know that the world is so much better because you are in it.